Hello, everybody. Happy September. Maria and I were just talking about how I feel like we are in this exciting era of fall right now. I don't know about you, but it's a little bit cooler at my house, which has been very fun for me. That means more time outside, less time sweating. But yeah, we're here to talk about anonymous storytelling. This is the topic that I get asked most about when it comes to the ethical storytelling report, or when I present about the report, I always get asked if I can go deeper on this. I am so excited to learn about it today. And in fact, I just checked our registration numbers. We had over 250 people register for this event, and it looks like we have lots of people still coming in from the waiting room, but at this moment, we have 49 people watching. So super excited to learn about this topic. Let's see, couple housekeeping things before we start. This is being recorded, so I know that we'll get that question 10 more times in the chat, and I will answer it every single time. But we are recording, and that means you're all going to receive a copy of the recording after the event, after it concludes. Um, like I said, oh yeah, we had over 250 people registered. I'm super ready to learn about this. I know our whole MemoryFox team specifically is, and I also know we have a lot of our own MemoryFox storytellers here today to watch this session, and then we're going to follow up with them at next week's campfire community. So if you don't know about the campfire community, that is a really great session that we host monthly, where we talk about a unique topic specific to MemoryFox and how best to use our tool, where we really have the community work together to share examples, solve problems, and get some more one-on-one access to our great customer success team. So hello to all the MemoryFox storytellers. Hello to everyone else who maybe will become a MemoryFox storyteller at some point. And yeah, in the interest of time, I'd love to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. So, this is not the first time you've probably seen Maria. Definitely not the first time you've seen her on the MemoryFox screen before. But just in case anybody is unaware, Maria Bryan is a trauma-informed storytelling trainer. She's the host of the Wind-Bearing Witness podcast, and she facilitates the Wind-Bearing Witness trauma-informed storytelling certification program. So I know some of you have probably been through that program. Some of you, I bet many more of you even probably listen to that podcast regularly. If not, highly recommend it. So Maria's work helps nonprofit leaders tell powerful and impactful stories that resist harm. Over the past 15 years in the nonprofit and public sector, Maria has trained thousands globally, in person and virtually. And she, of course, has a really hyper focus on trauma-informed storytelling and purpose-driven marketing. So, with that in mind, I'm going to kick it over to you, Maria. I'm so excited. I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to have, I'm going to be ready to share some more of these strategies, and right over to you.
Thank you so much, Carly. That was such a warm welcome. Let us know where y'all are coming in on the chat. I see Natalie's here. Welcome, Natalie. Excited for us to dig deeper at the campfire next week. Let's dig in. I have so much to share with you. I want to make sure we have time for questions. I want to share a quick story, and while I'm sharing this story, would love for you, if you would like, my gift to you is this storytelling toolkit. Carly or Natalie, whoever has the capacity for this, I forgot to grab the link. It's my website / trauma-informed storytelling toolkit. I don't know how many dashes in there, probably too many. But for those who are watching after the fact, scan that QR code. This will put you on my email list, but feel free to unsubscribe right away. I just want to make sure that you can put some of the things we're talking about into action. So I'll give you a few minutes for that. Thank you, either Carly or Natalie, for digging up that link. A few years ago, I was teaching at a conference, and during a break, a young person came to me and she said, I was in a nonprofit video a decade ago, and she pulled it up and she showed it to me and she started tearing up. And I was like, oh, this must have been like a really powerful experience for you. And she's like, I wanted to show it to you because I think it was the video was well done, but actually watching it has just bringing back really negative feelings for me. And I was like, oh no, what's going on? What are you feeling right now? She's like, this was an after school program that I was in, and it was during a very difficult time in my life. And, as many youth do, as many people do, when you're being interviewed, you totally disassociate. Sometimes you forget all the things that you're saying. She gave a lot of information, way more than was necessary for this story. She talked about unpack trauma in her life, all kinds of things. I won't go into the details of a few other liberties they took in this video, but overall, it wasn't the best experience for her. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that this video became her legacy. She realized that her college roommates had watched the movie before she even met them. So they knew parts of her history that she wasn't able to pick and choose whether she was going to tell them. Potential employers, because when you Googled her name, this video was coming up alongside LinkedIn. So potential employers were seeing this video, friends were seeing this video. And because her name, her first and last name were attributed to this video, not only was it difficult to tell the story and then to watch the video at the gala, but at this point, for 10 years, this video was associated with her. And she told me, you know what, Maria, I'm engaged and I'm getting married soon. And I am so, so excited to get married. But one thing I'm looking forward to, maybe the most, is changing my last name. So finally, this story won't be associated with me. And this is a true story. None of the stories I'm telling you, I'm making up. Something that when we talk about anonymous storytelling, people often say anonymous versus real stories. Anonymous stories are still real stories. So this is a true story that had such a deep impact on me that this beautiful woman who is doing amazing things with her life. This snippet of her life has just been captured on this 2-minute video that has haunted her for 10 years. So what we're going to talk about today, and I'm just seeing a few things. Woo, I'm looking at our chat. Good to see everybody here from all over the place. And yeah, thank you again, Carly, for finding the link to that. So do download this toolkit. Yeah, this is about us telling powerful stories that will move our mission, but just doing so in a way that people feel good about sharing their stories, and that we're uplifting folks and that we're protecting folks as we're moving our mission and fundraising and marketing and advocating for our cause. So if we haven't met, I am Maria Bryan. I'm a trauma-informed storytelling trainer. I started out in the Peace Corps in Ghana as a public health educator. I worked at 2 very large public health organizations in New York City. My life took the best turn when I started my little family. This is Winona in this picture here. She is 5 years old right now, and I have a 7-year-old. So I started my business right after my first child, Mia, was born. So I always know how old Maria Bryan Consulting is by Mia's birthdays. So just a few years ago, I was introduced to this concept of trauma-informed storytelling, and it impacted my life just as in a big way as having my 2 beautiful daughters. I stopped my services and just dove really deep into understanding trauma and its impacts on our body and our interactions with one another, and then connecting those dots as a nonprofit marketer, fundraiser. Essentially, I'm a storyteller. And before we go forward, I just want to say these kinds of trainings are not, hopefully, it's okay to feel a little bit of guilt and shame and to be introspective and reflective on our past practices. But I don't want to take away from how important your role is. And I really hope that you know how foundational storytelling is and how special the nonprofit sector is, because we tell stories like no other sector. We are really, really good about telling powerful, impactful, hair-raising stories in the best way. So let's keep telling these impactful stories. Let's just think about how we can do so in a way that mitigates harm and promotes safety. That's what this is all about. And so what we're going to talk about is when we should explore anonymous storytelling. We're going to look into quite a few case studies and creative formats. And then we're going to talk about just because we're telling an anonymous story doesn't mean we're not having good consent conversations and having important disclaimers for our audience. So we still want to be transparent with our story owners and our audience members. Okay, just want to take a minute to see how we're doing in the chat. Hello, hello. Okay, great. So why does anonymous storytelling matter? First and foremost, if you are here, it might be because of HIPAA. You can't tell stories giving out full names and identification. You might just be thinking, we might be putting folks at risk, even if they're consenting to give their story, either legally or their reputation. Also, I think like this young lady, she was not in a legal situation. But if she had known at 18 years old, the story was going to haunt her for 10 years, and that she had the ability to maybe just use her first name, simply just use her first name and not her last name, how things could have changed for her. So how can we just give a few extra pieces of agency to our story owners so that they have control over how their story is perceived in the world and how long it's out there in the world? But here's the thing about anonymous storytelling that we don't often talk about, and that is it pushes us to tell stories in a way that is creative, that's more interesting. Also, when we're telling these really singular stories about people, family, and communities, sometimes there's no room for nuance. There's no room for the systematic implications of why we do what we do. And sometimes anonymous storytelling, it just allows for us to tell the whole picture, to bring in more details, more of the what's going on systematically. So there's quite a few reasons why we might want to bring anonymous storytelling into our storytelling toolkit, no matter what our mission is, no matter how vulnerable the folks we work with are. So let's dig a little bit deeper if you're thinking, is this something that we should be doing? So right now in 2025, for those of you who are in the United States, there is a lot of fear with ICE raids. I know I worked many, many years ago at an organization that served Chinese immigrants, and we almost predominantly told anonymous stories, one because of HIPAA, but really more than anything, because these new Americans felt, even if they were legal citizens, had this fear around their citizenship, and they just preferred to tell anonymous stories. Maybe when folks tell their stories, it might open up unsafe, because of their work being unsafe, it might make matters worse. They might be talking about things that are stigmatized and they want to tell their story, but it's the world's not quite ready. And so telling their story anonymously is what they need to bravely tell their story. I also want to bring up re-traumatization. Again, going back to the story of this young woman, telling her story was difficult enough. Seeing it live at that gala was difficult, but she had to revisit this story year after year after year because people would see it and want to ask her questions. So story owners might for a season want to share their story and then might say, you know what, that season of advocacy, of testimony is behind me and I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to answer the tough questions anymore. And so anonymous storytelling allows for story owners to separate themselves from the traumatic stories that they might have shared, and it can continue to impact people, to change hearts and minds without their name and identity being associated with it. So I'm going to pause here. That's my argument for anonymous storytelling. But again, I gave this workshop just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the first things someone said is anonymous versus real storytelling. And people feel if they're anonymous stories that they're not real. So let me know in the chat, and I'll give you a minute to do this. What fears do you have, or maybe your organization, your donors, your board members, your leadership? What are fears that they have around anonymous storytelling? What is the hesitation? Anna says the story won't be as compelling, credibility. Yeah. that it is scripted. Taking stories without permission. Can't give enough details to make it feel real, not as authentic. Yeah, these are all fair. They're all fair. Because we've been telling stories with people's names. Thank you, Natalie. If we've been telling stories a certain way, people expect it. And when we suddenly tell an anonymous story, it's like, what's going on? Especially in the age of AI and deep fakes, people are like, what's going on? Why are we not telling the stories the way we have? They might think it's AI generated. Yeah, yeah. We have such a small community of patients that people know many of their kids by their name, want their information to help aid the decision-making process care for their child. Interesting. Carly says changing too many factors can make it feel like it's not true anymore. What is the person hiding? That's a good one. Lack of credibility. Not powerful. Katie, small ears, people can figure out we're going to talk about this. Yep. Yep. Okay. Let's keep going. Thank you. These are all thoughtful. And when we get to the Q&A, we'll explore these more. One thing I always say is like, this is a journey. I can't answer all your questions, but what I do know is that if we start telling anonymous stories and we normalize them, and the people to prioritize the safety of the people that we work with, I think it'll really help to mitigate some of these hesitations that I feel like not only do people around you have, but I can kind of tell that some of you might have these fears yourself. Let's get into case studies. These might not be perfect case studies, but they are folks that are bravely telling anonymous and composite storytelling. And I just want you to see what's possible. And we are going to talk about pros and limitations, y'all. So I'm not just going to tell you this is the be all. Let's talk about some of the limitations. And I love that some of you have already talked about specific limitations. When I think pseudonyms, I think maybe you're hearing their voice, the first name is there, maybe just the name has been removed, but a lot of the story is intact. Maybe interviews are intact, the quotes are intact. It's just, again, names are changed. So when you're doing this for written or spoken stories, that's probably the easiest way to do that. A lot of times when you're reading stories, you'll see pseudonyms. And this is one of the quickest way that we can protect identities. And again, I keep going back to that young woman, but if they just used her first name, her real first name and not her last name, that enough would have been protective of her. And it's something that even me on my website, when I list testimonials, and I have to go through because I haven't gotten them all, but I've just removed last name from testimonies, just in case someone changes a career and they just don't want their name being on my website. So something to think about, and that is if you have removed the last name or even changed the slightest details, let audiences know in a simple line at the beginning or the end of the story that details have been changed and why they were changed, simply to protect the safety of the person in the story. And we talk about images, right? Because some of you said it's like harder to have an emotional resonant story if you don't have images. You still can have images, and I'm not talking about the cheesy stock photos from the early aughts and 90s that just seem so commercial. There's still ways that you can use real pictures. There are limitations and safety on this, but one thing that you can do is take pictures of hands, take pictures of silhouettes, maybe the back of the head, or use objects or symbolic imagery. And I'm going to give an example of that. Some things to keep in mind. If this is just a checklist, we don't want to show their faces. Some things might slip through the cracks. For example, there's an organization I really love and trust, and they never showed the faces of the people they serve. But once they shared a picture and it was the back of the clients, but you could see the intersection of their center in the picture. So they did a good job of not showing her identity, but then they released the address of the center, which was not something that they wanted in the public. So again, I never like giving checklists. Let's use our integrity and our intention. Another thing, sometimes when you name pictures, you have, Maria Bryan, social media or whatever it is. When you post that picture, that meta tag or that geo tag is going to come up. So be very careful when you're posting images on your website or whatever, that those names will be public. So even if you made the name anonymous, be very, very careful. And I'll give you a very quick example. I write a newsletter. I was in the Peace Corps and I'm still in touch with all the folks that I served with. And I used to send out a PDF newsletter of just how everyone was doing, just a little newsletter update. And once I decided I was gonna do a web version, and it was private, you needed a password to get on it. And everyone sent me pictures and I uploaded those pictures. And what I didn't realize, even though the website was that page was private, anyone who sent me the picture and it was just a bunch of letters and numbers, it didn't really matter. But if you sent me the picture and your name was on it, that picture would come up in Google. So I had all of my sweet friends who posted pictures of themselves, of their family that might not have made those pictures public. Those pictures all became Googleable and I had to take that down immediately. And that's something that I didn't realize for 6 months, those pictures were up there until somebody realized that because of the meta tag of the image, that image was online and I was able to bring it down, but I don't know how those images were used in the meantime. I do want to give you a few examples of an organization doing this right. Emerge Lanka works with youth in Sri Lanka, and they do a really good job of showing real images of the youth and the men that they work with and adults that they work with without showing their faces. So this is one picture. Here's another one. Again, you can see the hands, people getting work done. The one on the right, typically folks will show pictures of staff, but not of the clients, of the beneficiaries. So what I love about these pictures is they're not stock photos, they're not AI photos. I don't have problems with either of those actually, but I do feel like you can use real pictures of the folks you serve and protect their identity. For those of you that are working internationally, this is extra important. Just because folks are hours and hours away by plane doesn't mean that we shouldn't be protecting their identity. So be very cautious how you're using images, even if you're working internationally. Okay, I'm going to show you the first 2 minutes of this video. This video is about female survivors. So if you don't have the capacity for that, we don't get into the details, but if you just don't have capacity for that, then you can just put me on mute for a couple of minutes. This video is for Sanctuary for Families, and just an example of how to still use the voice of clients while not showing their identity.
My small thing, a red dress. I always dress white and black colors because I never felt like pretty, beautiful, nothing. I saw this dress, I buy it. And I saw me on the mirror. I said, okay, this is a different person. The first time I wore this dress was a wedding, and that is maybe 7 years ago. Imagine me walking with that red dress and red shoes, all people looking at me. And I feel very comfortable, and I feel like this is me now. This dress mark the difference.
I had accepted that where I was where I was going to be for the rest of my life. A depressed, abused lady. My daughter had a friend whose mom was a pastor, and she opened up a church right across the street. And I went, and I see this lady sitting on a pulpit. And when I walked in the church, she walked off the pulpit, and she just gave me a hug. That hug woke up something inside of me, because I've been feeling like garbage for so many years. And I felt like a person. I'm like, oh my God, there is love still in the world. There's hope.
Okay, we'll give that a minute to sit with you. See if you have any questions in the chat. Yeah. Carly, I'm going to give you this deck. It has all the links. If you don't mind sharing this out. Someone asked about the link. Canterbury says, so we need to create new norm. And anonymous doesn't mean we don't know the person, but we are protecting them. Yes. Thank you. Beautifully said. Okay, wait, yeah, so I have all of these sourced at the end of this deck, so you can check them out after this time together. Illustrations in comics. I love when folks use illustrations in comics. So again, this is a way that you can be really creative, and I don't think I have a video in here, but there's some just really powerful videos that kind of read like graphic novels or that are illustrated. And you can just tell stories in a much more interesting way when you're using illustration or comics. And also, there's no misunderstanding. Even with what we just watched, those could have been people telling their own story, or they could have been actors. I really don't know because it's not disclosed. But with illustrations and comics, it's a little bit more clear that this is an anonymous story. And like some people said, it might feel a little too abstract if people are used to real faces and real names. But if you are just pulling a story out of thin air, which none of us are doing, make sure that you're letting people know in this illustration or comic, this is based on real experiences of the people that we work with. So here's a few examples. Braid Mission did this a few years ago. This is an organization that I love the mission of this organization, y'all. They provide mentors for foster youth. So it's just an additional support for them in addition to their social workers and their foster parents. And so, of course, foster youth, very vulnerable. We do not want to be giving away their identifying information. So this is a composite. And if you don't know what a composite story is, we're going to get to that next. But a composite story is just telling a combination of stories and patterns as one story. So in these little short comics, we get this transformation. We get a lot, actually, and you'll get this deck. So if you're trying to read it, don't worry about it. You'll have it so you can read it further. But this is just a great way for people to understand the journey of the folks that you work with while not giving away any information. The presentation I did last week was 2 hours, so I was able to show a really beautiful comic video. We don't have time for that, but I can send that link to Carly if you want to watch a video that's really powerful about immigration in the UK. Here's another example. This is actually at the community health center I worked with, and there was just a huge prevalence of hepatitis B in the Asian American community, especially in the Chinese community. People think of hepatitis B as a sexually transmitted disease, which it is, but in these communities, it was passed mother to child, still very, very stigmatized. So what they do is instead of getting people to grab the mic and talk about having hepatitis B, which was very difficult to do, they created this comic book called The Test. And of course, it was in English and in Chinese. And so folks could read about it and kind of get into why get tested and what the test looks like and what the results look like and what it means to have hepatitis B. So especially for those of you that are working in health, comics and illustrations can be a really great way to get things across. I am going to show a video. This is a short video by Love146. This does touch on sex trafficking. So if this is something you don't have the capacity for, then put us on mute for just a minute or two.
Oftentimes, traffickers will use gifts as a way to groom and recruit a lot of our youth. It's a sense of being loved and validated, but not realizing there's something on the other side and that they must give in return. Whereas what our survivor care social workers are showing them is we are giving this gift to you because we love and appreciate you, but you don't have to get anything in return. We had a survivor care social worker who was working with a youth, and the youth was really interested in getting the sweater. Legal Guardian was not able to provide it, and so the survivor care social worker looked top and down for this particular sweater online, in stores. Hard time finding the sweater. Eventually found it, presented it to her as a gift, and the youth was just so appreciative and just started crying, became very emotional, and she felt very validated and loved.
So one thing I really love about this story is we are seeing someone, the narrator is a staff person, but we're getting all this multimedia, right? We're getting these illustrations, this music, how they've created it is interesting. And for those of you who've worked with youth who've been trafficked, this idea of a gift with no strings attached still gives me goosebumps. Okay, composite storytelling. Probably one of the most, Carly, give me an amen, controversial parts of trauma-informed and ethical storytelling. Let me know, any journalists in the house, like former journalists in the house? There's
Yes,
always
this does
one,
come up a lot with me.
doesn't it?
People
Yeah.
ask me a lot if I feel like it's ethical or not. So yeah, it's a tough one, but I'm excited to see your examples here.
Yes, yes. So composite storytelling, those actually, much of what we've seen are actually composite storytellings. Those comics were composite stories. No one just imagined what it might be like to go get your aunt tested for hepatitis B. Those were all based on true stories. There's just no name given to this particular family. Same with the comic books. But those of us who might have been trained in the world of journalism, if we're not using their real name, if we're not showing their face, this is a story that we cannot tell. So composite storytelling, again, it is telling a singular story of a few different experiences. So I understand where this gets sticky and when we have to have a great deal of integrity. So here's one best practice, and that is don't cherry pick the most horrific beginning and the most amazing transformation and putting composite story together. This is where we really have to bring in nuance, bring in complexity, make sure we're having people with lived experiences review these stories so it feels authentic. I'm actually going to show another story from Love 146 in a moment, and they do a good job of sometimes telling stories and then retracting them so they can get more people who have similar lived experiences to review them. I feel like this is one of the best ways that we can mitigate any kind of harm that we do within composite storytelling. None of these are perfect, but I think that they can be a really wonderful route to still tell stories. Okay. So again, here's another story from Love 146 because I think they do phenomenal storytelling. This is a composite story. We go a little bit more into detail about trafficking and sexual violence. So again, if you don't have capacity, this is probably about a minute or two.
My trafficker made me believe I couldn't survive without him. So when I first met Love 146, I was freaked out about telling people like them too much would get me in trouble. So I sat there and they talked to me about trafficking and stuff. Right around then, like right after that, I was on the run for a while. When I was able to come back, Love 146 showed up again, and they helped me realize that he was actually trafficking me. So f***ed up, man. I was so embarrassed, but Miss Becky told me I wasn't a bad kid, and I didn't have to fix this all by myself. She's my Love 146 social worker, and one of the only people who actually cared about me back then. Today, life's not all about all that bad stuff that happened. It's about the things I'm doing now, like graduating and getting my first apartment with friends my age. I'm doing okay. Yeah.
You know, I've never watched it this far in, and so I now see that they actually do have a disclaimer at the end. I don't know if you caught that. They have a disclaimer about this being a compilation of stories, which I'm really happy to see. So that's cool. Okay. So now that we've gone through some of those examples, let's talk about how we can still ensure that we're doing this with integrity just because it's anonymous. I know someone said just because it's anonymous, sometimes we're not even telling our story owners that we're publishing their story. So let's talk about that. When you are putting together a story like one of these stories that we've seen, it's still important to let folks know where their story is going to show up. So let them know what it means that it's going to be anonymous and what it doesn't mean. So if you're just using a pseudonym, let them know, there is a risk that someone might hear your voice, like that video where we heard their voices, or not enough information has changed, quell any fears that they have, or let them know what that means. If it is a composite story, let them know there's, enough details will be changed. What platforms are this, is this just going to be closed at a one-time event? Is this going to be on social media? How long will this be up? And I think that we should let folks decide how anonymous, if they're comfortable with pseudonym, if they're cool with this becoming a comic or a composite story. And again, you really have to explain what that means. I remember once I wrote a story for a publication, and it was a very personal story, and I got a lot of readers. I got a lot of hits to the website. And after a few years, I just wasn't comfortable with that story being out there anymore. And they offered to make the story anonymous. And I turned that down. I just wanted the story down. And so let people know just making it anonymous sometimes is not enough for story owners to feel comfortable and safe. Also be clear with what you can do and what's out of your control. So we can remove stories, we can retract stories, but we don't know how they might have been shared. Like when I said that I had posted pictures of my dear friends and their names were in the meta tags. I don't know what happened with those pictures until it was brought to my attention, and I brought it down. And with that, have a retraction policy and plan in place. Even if you think that you've done your due diligence with removing identifiers, you want someone to be able to very quickly be able to let you know that that story, that they have been identified in this story, and that story needs to be taken down. And what is your game plan to get that down as quickly as possible, and to let folks know internally in your organization what to do next. And I just want to show what this looks like in practice. So Samaritan was doing a research project on self-harm. And I love this little paragraph where they let folks know where this info is going to show up. So the question in this form is, will I be identified? And the answer is no, you will not be identified or identifiable in any results, report, publications, or case studies that come from this research. So they showed there will be case studies, right? We will be telling stories. We will not use your name or identity when we write about the study. For example, we will use quotes in a report or write up individual stories with no names, or make up composite stories from all the information provided so that the individuals can't recognize themselves. So this is pretty clear. And I would like to know if they're using a quote from me, you know, is my name going to be associated with it? Is it just going to be my first name, etc. So this, I think it's really, really important to be clear. And I even think the word composite storytellers, if I have to explain it to nonprofit marketers, we probably need to be using language that our story owners are just very simple for them to understand what we mean by anonymous storytelling and composite storytelling, right? So let's be clear with that. Disclosures. And I was so thrilled to see that disclosure from Love 146 because I don't often see disclosures when stories are anonymous or composite. And I think this might quell a lot of fears that leaders have in the nonprofit space about telling anonymous and composite storytellers. We simply need to just let our audiences know, and in a way that is jargon-free, that is just human. So here's a few examples when you're telling an anonymous story, and you can use this in the beginning of the story, at the end of the story, if in a video. I always think at the beginning of the story is a little bit better than at the end. But as you can see reading these, it makes it very clear that we aim to protect the people that we work with. This is our goal. This is why we exist as a nonprofit. So we're not going to break that in order to raise money. Sometimes we forget the simplest reasons why we do what we do. We are here to protect the people that we work with, so we are telling their story anonymously. Again, I'm going to give you this deck. So if you're frantically writing things down, don't worry, I'll give this, you'll have this as a cheat sheet. Composite disclosures. Composite's really tricky because again, sometimes you don't know that Isaiah, the video of Isaiah, I know that that was an actor because I know that that organization used actors. But you might have not known that that was an actor and that was a composite story. So I think it's worth, how do we normalize anonymous and composite storytelling? One of the best ways, again, is by using some of these disclosures. So here's just a few examples. And again, this is just really simple human one sentences that explain why we're telling these stories and the way that we are. So again, just to kind of wrap up, this is not a checklist, but just some things for you to be thinking about. I worry about checklists that we forget, we let things slide through the cracks when we've just checked things off. But here's some things to think about. Before you release a story, read through it, have somebody else review it, and make sure if someone has asked for a composite story, you're not actually, oops, doing an anonymous storyteller, and there's a little bit more information than they would be comfortable. Visuals and language. Check the closed captioning, the tags, the metadata on images, and make sure there's no identifying information that is not in the bigger picture, in the copy, in the video. Choose platforms you can monitor. Social media is still the wild, wild west. So even if you're telling composite anonymous stories, if they are vulnerable stories, and if they might still, at the end of the day, put someone in danger, make sure that you are monitoring these stories. Transparency matters to our audiences. It matters to normalize anonymous and composite storytelling. So create these disclaimers, and I suggest putting them in the beginning of the story, not at the end of the story. Have a retraction policy and make that pathway easy and accessible. So if someone like me changes their mind about a story that is out there in the wild, they have someone that they can get in touch with easy. I always say to have a more general email like story retraction at MemoryFox because typically people are in a given position for maybe 3 to 5 years. I'd love to say that folks in any particular nonprofit role will be there forever and ever. But if it's Maria at MemoryFox and then I leave, I move on, then that complicates the retraction process. So have a very general email if someone wants to or needs to retract their story. So I have quite a bit of time for Q&A. And so I just want to pause here and before we get into questions, and I I want us to start thinking of anonymous stories as not an erasure of real stories, but a vehicle to still tell impactful stories in a way that protects the very people that we are working with. These are still real stories. So before we get to questions, I'd love to know, what are your aha moments? Was there one particular story that really resonated with you? And then I'd love to take any, I'm sure we have a lot of questions about how we can still do this with integrity. And I know those examples are not perfect, but I think they're a really brave starting place. Hi, Carly.
Hello. Well, I had some aha moments.
Yes.
Let me share a couple with you as questions continue to come in. So, um, even as someone who is I am chronically online, right? I'm somebody who's like, I'm always Googling stuff. I'm on ChatGPT. I'm on TikTok. I'm everywhere. When you brought up the part about the meta tags of what the image is called and how when you right click and download something and how that stays with an image, I mean that's a light bulb moment for me. It seems so obvious now that
Right.
you've said it because I've downloaded things 1,000 times, right? And usually they say, if it's a logo, it says like logo black and white or
Uh-huh.
something, and but it could say, the Robinson family or something, and that could very well give away someone's identity. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I also wanted to say, I loved your tip towards the beginning where you mentioned even something like removing the last name is something where, sometimes first names can be general enough that we don't really have to worry, too much about that following them too far in advance or too far down the line, right? So,
Right.
I thought that was a great tip and again, kind of maybe an obvious one in hindsight, but really nice to hear. Great. Okay, so some questions that came up. First, I will address this because I got it a few times. Yes, this session is being recorded. We will send the recording afterwards. And Maria has mentioned that she would also like to share the slides. So if you want to see those videos, those YouTube videos, the full links, you can check those out. Those will be in the slideshow. Okay, so some other questions that came up. I had one question that came from, well, more of a note, more of a commentary. Wondering a little bit more about the option for animated content.
Right.
If you have maybe some suggestions of like great ways to get started with something like that, because if you're unfamiliar with how to do something like that, that could feel like a big
Right.
lift.
Woo! Okay. In the age of AI, probably going to be a lot easier than we think.
I
If you asked me this
agree.
2 years ago, I would say it might be an investment. You might have to find an illustrator, someone that does whiteboarding. I worked for a video production agency for a few years. We didn't do that. I mean, we'd have to hire someone if we wanted to do whiteboarding. You could see with that one video, it wasn't white. I don't know if you know what I mean by whiteboarding, where it's almost like when someone's drawing as they're talking. There's a lot of interesting
Yeah.
ways. And then there's animated, right? Which what I showed was almost like a flat image being moved around, right? So I think you might be able to use a tool like Canva to do that. For better for worse, y'all, I think AI is getting really close, if not already. There might be a free or low cost tool to animate. And let me know. Amelia says Next Day Animation specializes in work and whiteboarding. That's great.
Oh,
That's
that's a
great.
good
We're in
tip.
the age of AI. Yeah. Anyone else, if you, when it comes to illustrations, comic books, whiteboarding, and animation, any tips that you have for agencies and creatives that
Yeah.
do that? Let's support them.
I
Great
do agree
tools for your team.
with your advice about AI, especially in Canva. There's a lot of new tools that they're trying out every day. I will say some of them work better than others, but if you're open to being creative and giving new, even beta versions a try of things, especially if you have Canva for nonprofits, which is, free for nonprofits, highly recommend giving that a try. Great. Let's see. Did anybody else mention that? That might have been it for that. Okay. So let's say, okay, so here's another question that came in. This one actually is in the Q&A. So this came from Leah. Leah
Okay.
said, our clinical team has had a hard time collecting stories from our domestic violence clients, and the rest of the staff has no access to clients. Is it ethical to use stories that people share about domestic violence from Facebook groups?
Oh, okay. First and foremost, this is very tricky. I would say if someone is sharing something in a group, generally Facebook groups are closed, it's going to feel like a huge, massive breach of trust. So I have even written things publicly, like commented on folks' LinkedIn, and I've had those people say, hey, what you wrote was really impactful. Do you mind if I use that in an upcoming email? So I think we should always just lean on, if you're going to retell a story, to ask them and then to let them know we'll use this anonymously. This is where I think composite storytelling is the way to go. If you're in a Facebook group and you're going to see patterns in it. We all know this. You're inevitably going to see patterns of experiences. So if you can take all of those experiences and turn them into a singular story, you really want to make sure you're telling the story where no one in the room is going to say, I think I know who, or I read that before. You just have to change enough details where that wouldn't be the case. Hopefully that answers the question. We need to be really careful when people are sharing in a group, for sure.
Definitely, because they're sharing to a with the
You're
intention
being
of only
vulnerable.
having this audience
Right.
reading this, right? And that
Right.
wasn't necessarily, it was likely not their intention that it be somewhere else that they weren't hoping for. But yeah, I do think, I think especially fundraisers can be really good at this because, we ask for money all the time, right? We have to ask many, many times often for things, and we have to find creative ways to do so. So I do think that, like you're saying, it is okay to maybe comment back and say, would you mind if if you shared your email with me so we could chat about something, if you're interested, and of course, no pressure, something like that. I think it never really hurts to ask, of course, and kind of share your intentions with people. And of course, if they say no, then a no is a
And
no,
there's your
just like
answer.
it is in fundraising. So I think
Right, right. And also that's a good gut check. If you feel like you're not comfortable asking someone in a closed group if you can share their story even anonymously, then don't share it. That's your
I
answer.
already have
If
your
it feels
answer.
uncomfortable asking them, then listen to your gut, listen to your intuition.
I agree. All right, this question came in from Nora. Nora said, what about circumstances where it is inappropriate to ask the individual about sharing their story? Maybe more of a case example. Um, Anonymously for a time-sensitive situation like policymaking. Um, for example, the need to share the current state of crisis services and where youth clients. Okay, so maybe if something kind of brand new is coming up,
Right.
could it be inappropriate to maybe put a timeline or maybe urgency behind an ask like that?
Let me find that question, Nora, so I can
It's a
read
little
it.
bit further up, so I think I'm probably missing some of the nuance here, but anonymously for a time-sensitive situation like policymaking.
So Nora, because I see that you're still here in the chat, if it's Nora Z, is your concern that you won't have enough time to get, like this is an important story to share, but we're not going to have enough time to get the sign off on telling the story? Is that the concern? And if that is the concern, what I would say is, and I get it, because right now in 2025, there are some we need to let people know the realities of what's going on. I would really lean into making that a composite story. Don't just tell a singular story, find a couple of patterns and then create a composite story and just be clear. This is what we're seeing in our community. We're seeing that people are, you know, and whatever that particular alarming pattern is. I hope that helps. This is tricky. I don't want anonymous
That
storytelling.
is a tricky one. Yeah, time sensitive. I mean, that does often happen for nonprofits, right? We
And
find.
Nora says, do we not need to have, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Oh no,
Carly.
go ahead.
Yeah. And so she's like, so you don't need consent if you're telling a composite storytelling. And I'm not going to say I don't have an answer. I just can't tell you, like, your organization has to decide
Mhm.
uh, what it's going to be. I can't answer that for you. If you can get consent for your composite storytelling, and we saw with the Samaritan research, we are collecting your information and your stories, and we're going to create a composite storytelling. To me, that is preferred. I mean, that is really the way to go. But sometimes, we're offhand telling a story, we're telling a story in a speech, something just comes to mind. Um, I know the realities are, it can be really hard to get consent for a composite story. So I would say just have your values, not to say that you are less ethical if you don't get consent for composite stories, but there's going to be some composite stories that are so common in your world that it would be really hard to tie it to one particular family or person. So it's going to be different for every story. It's going to be different for every incident. As you heard, I tell a lot of stories. And when I can, will ask, can I tell this story anonymously? And sometimes I'll just change as many of the details as possible to still get to the heart of what I'm trying to say, but to not give away any identifiers.
I think that's good advice. And it reminds me of, I know you've spoken with Allie Levine before. We've had Allie Levine on our webinar series before. Um, and I imagine, I mean, I won't put words in her mouth, of course. She would be happy to answer anybody's questions about consent and the legality versus morality
Right,
and how that works. But
right,
I would imagine she would say, what you need to do is consider the risks on both sides, right? What would be the risk of not getting the consent? And are these things that you could mitigate, or that you can measure, that you can mitigate, and that you can address if and when that happens? And also on the storyteller side, right? What sort of risks might occur for them if you were to share a composite story that has a portion of their story in it that maybe to you doesn't seem like it's identifying, maybe to others, maybe you see have several people reading that sort of thing. I think that something like that, like you said, it's kind of hard to say yes or no. Definitely yes, definitely no on something like that.
right,
Of course, always consent is always something we would like to have, especially if we know we are referencing somebody in particular. But if you truly are making a composite story that you know represents many, many people, it can be kind of hard to feel like, did I get enough consent at that point? I don't
right.
know, but I would say
How
Allie would
hard.
probably recommend your risk management in that
Right,
case.
right, right, right. And I think also this is why it's important, the bigger question, using tools like MemoryFox does allow you to say like, hey, we have this story bank
Right.
and have consent for these stories. And especially if we've been clear how we're going to use these stories, we might use them for composite. That's really, it's a systems issue. Like, how can we start out having a bank of stories and we know we're going to go to these stories either to tell stories with all the identifiers or anonymous or composite.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right, I have one more question. I will say, if anybody wants to stay on after 3 o'clock, I will give a short demo about MemoryFox. So I'd love to have you stick around and learn a little bit about MemoryFox, of course, if you're interested. But last question comes from our friend Ainsley. She said, what is the best practice for already sharing a story anonymously, but then that anonymous person has passed away? That's a tough one,
Oh, and it's anonymous.
but it's already anonymous, right?
Right, right, right.
Hmm.
I would go to their family. I'd go to their family and say, this is a story that's really resonant. It's been anonymous. Don't do this like days after they passed away, give some time for the
Yeah,
family. But I would say don't use it. And this is so hard because I know folks, this is not the first time I've gotten this question. They literally work in hospice, they work
right.
with people who are at the end of their life. Um, so I would say pause the story and then talk to the family to see if they're comfortable with this story continuing to go on. I
I
know you're
think,
closing up, Carly. I just want
yes.
to say thank y'all I'm seeing your chat. for being so thoughtful and engaged, and for allowing us to walk through the nuance of this together. And yes, you're going to get the slides and the recording.
Yes, thank you so much. I wish, of course, as every time you present, I always wish we had more time. I, always love learning from you, and I think that our audience does as well. So definitely drop some love for Maria in the chat here. She'll be able to reach out to you afterwards, so you can also let her know what you thought of the webinar, let her know the things that you learned, the things that you thought were the things that you're going to go start doing tomorrow or the next day or the next day, right? That's always the best when you can say, I learned this and I'm going to start doing it tomorrow. So thank you so much, Maria. Like I said, if anybody wants to stick around, I would love to show you how MemoryFox works. And before I do that, I do want to plug one other thing that I have going on here, if I can find the link.
I'm going to leave and send you the deck so everybody has
Okay,
that. Thank you,
fabulous.
Carly. Thank
Everyone,
you,
you'll get the
everybody.
recording. Have a great day. So let me find here. I'm looking for. Well, I'll just have to send it in the follow-up. But we have our 2025 ethical storytelling survey that is out right now. So I'm hoping that I'll find some help from all of you to go ahead and fill out that survey for me. But let's get to the good part here. Let's talk a little bit about some MemoryFox stuff. For anybody that is not aware of how MemoryFox works, here, I'm just going to go through a quick little 5-minute demo with you, and I'd love to chat with each of you individually if you have some time. But let's think about it, because here's the thing. MemoryFox is the #1 ethical storytelling tool for nonprofits. Maria, she's a big advocate of ours, of course, and I'm sure a lot of you that attended today, you're already MemoryFox storytellers, and you know that we are the #1 ethical storytelling tool. So what I like to do is I love to kick it off with this question, which is, if someone asks, what is your mission? Can you show them? And the idea here is that I'm sure you all can recite your mission like the back of your hand, right? You know exactly what's on your website. You know exactly what's on your social media channels in terms of the words and in terms of the things that you and your board have decided on. But do you have the pictures and visuals that really can show people your mission in action? Oh, thank you, Natalie, for dropping that survey link. That is so helpful. But great. And I would say that if you are finding yourself answering no to that question, I want to ask what is stopping you. So you can drop this in the chat, or because the thing is, I usually find that when we talk to nonprofit professionals, they have one of these kind of 4 pain points. Number 1 is collecting content from our community is like pulling teeth. Number 2 is that organizing content is frustrating and very time consuming. Number 3 is that we need a more efficient and modern way to share our story. And number 4 is I struggle with collecting community stories ethically. So you may be here today because you find number 4 to be your biggest pain point. Maybe you find a combination. Maybe at any given time, something is more of a pain point than the other one. But I want to say that we actually built a platform to address all of these pain points head on. So we have a collect, organize, and share system that is also followed up by this idea that we know that nonprofits have been given this impossible task of competing in the attention economy while also remaining true to the ethical standards for authenticity and storytelling. So we know you are held to a higher standard than for-profit companies when it comes to your storytelling, when it comes to your fundraising, when it comes to everything, right? When it comes to your brand awareness. And that is why, we take extra care to make sure that ethical storytelling is something that we prioritize. And actually, when we did our first survey back in 2023, we found that 58% of nonprofit professionals like you said they actually struggle with wanting to collect stories from their community while doing no harm. So 58%, it's likely that some of you are feeling that way as well. But let me tell you how it works. So we're part of the collect, organize, and share process. Of course, step number 1 is collecting the story. So if you want to see how it works, you can scan that QR code. That goes to an example campaign where you can, submit your pet photo or a great landscape photo. But really how it works is we work with you to build branded campaigns that you distribute to your community. So When you send that out, which is a link or a QR code, your community opens it up on their own device, the device that they're most comfortable with, and they're able to submit videos, photos, and written testimonials to you. The really good thing about our Collect system is that there's no download or login required. People don't have to download an app to submit stories to you. We also take great care to make sure that the consent and the contact info is captured up front. That can be required or that can be optional. That's completely up to you as an organization. And then finally, when people do submit their photo, video, or written testimonial to you, it can redirect back to your website, which really kind of makes it seem like a seamless process where people feel like they've just been interacting with you and not MemoryFox the whole time. The second step here is the organized portion. So once somebody has submitted videos and photos and written testimonials to you, they automatically go to your story bank. The great thing about your MemoryFox story bank is that your stories are not forward facing until you're ready for them to be forward facing. So everyone on your team can approve the content, edit the content, make sure that the content makes sense for what you're looking for. And then they can say, okay, I want to maybe tag this by program, by event, by department, and I want to make sure that we're super organized for when we're ready to use our stories. Another great thing about the story bank is that we have a bulk upload option, so you can actually, any story you already have before you become a MemoryFox storyteller, you can put that in your story bank and stay organized with that as well. And we do offer unlimited storage. We really don't want you to feel like you need to be limited by the amount of stories that you tell or by the amount of stories that you collect from your community. So unlimited storage, that's how we do it. Then finally, in terms of sharing,
Thank you, caregivers.
In terms of sharing, we have several ways that we help you share your content in a more compelling way and in a modern way. So, for example, we have a video editor. If you want to combine and edit your story clips and put them together, we can definitely be able to help you out with that with our video editor. We also have a story page builder. This is an example of what a story page would look like. And it's a full website that you can either embed onto your website or that you can embed into a web page, or you can share by itself. So that's a great way to share a lot of stories one after another. Finally, the really great thing about the share process is that everything that was sent to your story bank is in the high quality original. So that means that you're not going to get thumbnails, you're not going to get blurry photos, you're not going to get things that you potentially can't use. And then of course we are integrated with Canva, which is a great perk for us and for you because that means that your videos and photos actually automatically go to your Canva account. And that means that it's super easy for you to drag and drop into your templates that you already use, maybe add your branding and send it out. And like I said, we do everything through an ethical storytelling lens. So here are just some of the features that we offer right now that really enhance your ethical storytelling needs. First of all, we do offer equitable pricing, and that's because we really believe that every nonprofit has a great story to tell. Second, I already mentioned this, but we do have the consent, which is built-in editable, and you can always have a consent removal option, which I shared in the chat earlier. Your storytellers are always able to remove their consent if they decide later that they don't want that story shared. Next, in terms of privacy, I want you to know that MemoryFox never owns your content. So unlike if you're collecting stories through Facebook or Instagram, where they actually own that content after it's been posted there, the MemoryFox platform, your content is always yours. In terms of accessibility, your storytellers are able to share their stories from anywhere that they're comfortable doing so because they open it up on their own device. So mobile, desktop, tablet, they're able to share when and where they're most comfortable, which really gives you the best, most ethical stories. And finally, everything about MemoryFox is customizable. So that means that you can use your strength-based language that you prefer to talk to your community in, and then therefore they're able to really be spoken to in the way that they're comfortable with, as well as the way that they most understand. So everything's super customizable. And if you've made it this far, of course, we have some great offers for you. So right now we're actually offering two different things. So if you are a nonprofit that operates on 1.5 million annual revenue or greater, we would love to meet with you and discuss your unique storytelling goals. So what we're going to do for our group of attendees here that are here at the webinar today, the first 5 nonprofits who become a MemoryFox storyteller from this group will receive a custom ethical storytelling training with me. So basically, I have this great storytelling training. I'll make sure that it's hyper personalized for your unique mission. So we'd love to have you book and learn more about our ethical storytelling goals and how our tool works. And then if you are a nonprofit that operates on 1.5 million or lower, we have a new offering called MemoryFox Flame, and it's this great way where small nonprofits can get in the door and get their storytelling started. So when you go to memoryfox.io/tryflame, you can actually get MemoryFox for $99 a month. And because Maria is a great partner of ours, we are going to offer 10% off for anybody here that is enjoying the webinar. You just have to use code Maria10. So thank you so much. I will follow up with all this information, the recording, all the links we talked about today. And I will stop sharing my screen here. Looks like we have just a couple questions. So Chandra said, do you have multilingual options, Spanish translations for consent? So we do have some language options. Basically, I would love to meet with you and talk about our language options specifically because I think maybe we can figure out the answer to your question here. And that's something that we would like to have a unique conversation about, but we do have different language options, yes. And it looks like GK said, I might be able to write the price of MemoryFox into a grant. That's a great thing to do. We have some people that work with us that do so through grant funding. So I do recommend that. If you do want to meet with us and find a time, we can definitely get some pricing over to you so then you can be able to do that. But thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you for those who stuck around. It is always great to see everybody. Have a great fall. Hope everyone's having a wonderful back to school season. And we'll see you at our next event, which is going to be about end of year emailing. So if you want to sign up for that, I'll put that in the follow-up email as well. Talk to you all soon. Have a great rest of your day.